Florida, 1987. In the nearby suburb of Gulf Breeze, an alleged close encounter set off one of the most debated UFO cases of the late 1980s. Ed Walters, a local contractor, reported that he was working in his home office when he noticed an unusually bright light shining into his yard. When he stepped outside, he said he saw a glowing, top-shaped craft hovering above the ground. According to Walters, he ran back inside to grab a Polaroid camera and returned outside to take photographs, moving into the street to get a closer view. Several of the images were later shared publicly and became central to the story. Walters claimed that a bluish-white beam of light struck him and lifted him off the ground. He reported hearing a voice say, "Don't worry, we will not harm you." He also said he experienced a rapid series of images in his mind and then later regained awareness with limited memory of what happened next. Walters' photographs were developed and published in a local newspaper in the weeks that followed, quickly drawing attention and skepticism. More than 30 witnesses reportedly came forward to say they had seen unusual lights in the sky that night, adding to the case's visibility. In the subsequent weeks, Walters said he experienced further encounters involving flying craft and small, large-eyed beings, and additional photographs were released. As the story spread, it became a flashpoint within the broader UFO community. The Gulf Breeze reports divided UFO researchers and investigators over whether the events occurred as described and whether Walters' evidence was authentic. Supporters argued that the consistency of the narrative and the number of people reporting strange lights merited serious consideration, while critics focused on photographic anomalies and the possibility of fabrication. By 1990, Walters and his wife moved to a new home, citing intense media attention and ongoing controversy. Around that time, a new owner of the former house said a paper model resembling the UFO had been found in the attic. Skeptics treated the discovery as evidence that the photographs could have been staged, while Walters' supporters argued the model may have been planted by those intent on discrediting the case. Today, the Gulf Breeze encounters are still cited as a major and highly disputed episode in modern UFO history. 5000 BC. The sun rises over the Persian Gulf, turning the water to hammered copper and throwing long shadows over the shoreline. The morning is otherwise ordinary, wind off the sea, the hush before work begins, until a ripple forms where no boat should be. Tribespeople pause, watching as the surface swells and parts, and a figure slowly lifts itself from the shallows. At first glance, it looks like something born of the deep, a scaled body slick with seawater, the contours catching the light like wet stone. But as it steps forward, the onlookers see details that unsettle and intrigue in equal measure: face, hands, and feet that appear unmistakably human. The stranger does not thrash or threaten. Instead, he stands with a calm certainty, as if he has been expected all along. Then he speaks, and the shock deepens. In their own language, with a clarity that suggests more than mimicry, he introduces himself. He calls himself Owns. Day after day, he returns to the shore, not to demand tribute, but to teach. He shows them the patterns of civilization, how to order their lives, how to record and measure, how to build and plan, how to pass knowledge forward. When dusk comes, he does not remain among them. He turns back toward the water and disappears into the sea, returning each night to the place he came from. According to the ancient Babylonian priest and historian Berossus, writing centuries later and preserving traditions he said were far older, this is how the first encounter with a non-human intelligence took place. In his account, Owns was not merely a curiosity from the sea, but a bringer of order, a teacher who arrived when people were still scattered and unlettered, and who left behind the building blocks of organized society. Read one way, the story is myth, a symbolic tale about knowledge arriving from an unknown source and transforming a culture. Read another way, it functions like a memory fossilized in legend, a narrative that might have been shaped by a real, bewildering event and then retold until it became sacred history. That ambiguity is part of its pull. Even a skeptical scientist like Carl Sagan allowed for the possibility that some ancient stories could preserve distorted but meaningful traces of extraordinary encounters. He did not present Ones as proof of anything, but he entertained the idea that the legend might reflect an early human attempt to describe contact with an intelligence that seemed outside the familiar, and that the persistent detail of an origin from the sea could be more than a poetic flourish. In 1933, far in northern Sweden, the county of Västerbotten began to attract the kind of attention it was never meant to hold. Just south of the Arctic Circle, the land there turns harsh and secretive, endless dark firs, steep ridges, and narrow valleys that cut toward the Norwegian border like corridors. In late fall, when daylight thins and the first hard freezes lock the ground, sound carries strangely in the open stretches and disappears entirely in the woods. People were used to isolation. They were not used to lights moving where no lights should be. At first the stories were told in the cautious, half-joking way people share something unsettling, a glimmer sliding along the valley wall, a pale beam that winked through drifting snow, the low, steady thrum of an engine muffled by distance. Then the accounts multiplied and the tone changed. Farmers, timber workers, and travelers on the winter roads described aircraft lights threading through the valleys that link Sweden and Norway, as if a pilot, unseen, were deliberately using the terrain to stay below the clouds and below notice. The problem was that Västerbotten had almost nothing in the way of eyes in the air. The region had one airplane and one ambulance plane, and the ambulance aircraft sat grounded, laid up for repairs when it was needed most. If something was flying the valleys at night, there was no ready way to meet it, follow it, or force it down. To officials watching the border, the thought was intolerable, a hidden route through the mountains used in darkness beyond routine patrols. Police officers and customs agents moved first because the simplest explanation was also the most practical: smugglers. In a place this remote, contraband could slip across a border in the time it takes a patrol to turn around. Investigators questioned locals, walked tracks in the snow, and watched the most likely passes. They searched for fuel caches, makeshift landing strips, anything, any ordinary sign that would turn the mystery into a case. But each lead thinned into nothing. No wreckage. No footprints where a crew should have been. No confirmed landings. Just more reports arriving like fresh snowfall, quiet at first, then impossible to ignore. By early January 1934, the whispers had become a headline, and the mystery acquired a name that made it harder to dismiss: the Phantom Flyers. Witnesses were no longer describing only lights. Over 40 people, independently of one another, claimed to have seen the craft itself, large grey aircraft without markings, passing overhead with a blunt, indifferent certainty. The descriptions carried the same unnerving detail: a shape emerging for a moment from cloud or darkness, then sliding back into it, leaving behind the uneasy question of what had just crossed the border and why it seemed so intent on not being identified. The Swedish Air Force was called in. Planes were dispatched to investigate, and for a time it seemed the matter might end the way most rumors do, with an official report and a mundane explanation. But the airmen returned with empty skies. They reported finding nothing at all: no unmarked aircraft, no distant engine noise, no light slipping between peaks. That absence only deepened the dread. If experienced pilots could not find what villagers claimed to be seeing, then either the witnesses were all wrong in the same way, or something was there, skilled at vanishing whenever it was pursued. Meanwhile, the story refused to stay contained within one county. As rumors ran along telegraph lines and through newspapers, neighboring Norway and Denmark reported that they too were collecting similar accounts, sightings documented by people who insisted they knew the difference between a star, a weather illusion, and an aircraft flying low. The geography that once made the region feel protected now felt like a trap. The same mountains and valleys that sheltered communities also offered cover to anything that wanted to move unseen. By the end of 1934, Scandinavia had logged 487 reports in total, and 100 were judged credible, an unsettling number for something no one could capture on paper as more than testimony. The sightings then diminished as winter gave way, as if whatever had been moving through the darkness had simply finished its work. People tried to return to routine. Yet the quiet that followed did not feel like relief. It felt like the pause you notice only after a sound has stopped, an awareness that something could start again at any moment. And then it did. In 1936, the reports returned, and with them came the old certainty in the voices of those who said they had seen it. Hundreds more witnesses describing the same kind of craft, the same strange passages through the northern sky. Explanations rose and fell. Smugglers, secret tests, foreign aircraft, misidentifications. None settled the matter. What remains is a trail of observations across Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, numbers, dates, and sworn statements pointing to something that behaved like an aircraft and yet refused every attempt to be confirmed. To this day, the phantom flyers of Scandinavia linger in the record as an unanswered question, suspended between winter darkness and the thin edge of daylight.